We're in Lewisburg, Tennessee today, visiting Crowder Fields, and we've got a treat for you. This is Ken Crowder, and he started this about 15 years ago?
Well, this particular thing about 6 years ago,
Okay.
but I've been doing ornamental horticulture for almost 40 years.
What drew you to ornamental grasses?
I think the big thing right now is in landscaping for municipal, they're doing rain gardens, and a lot of these plants can be used in rain gardens.
And you dig it by hand?
I do, yes ma'am.
You don't use a front end loader or anything?
No.
And you have what? You said about 30
I have
varieties?
probably about 30 varieties of ornamental grasses. Anywhere from Miscanthus to muhlengrass, Penisetums, Panicums.
And most grasses all have the same growing requirements?
Most do. I mean, these all are pretty hardy in any type of soil. But some plants like it a little bit wetter, some will like it a little drier. But in a person's landscape, they're going to water pretty much every week, so they'll do fine.
All right, Ken, tell me all about this plant.
All right, this is Miscanthus gracillamus, and it's a plant that grows normally between 5 to 6 feet tall during the summer. And then come about the 1st of September, it's going to have a feathery plume on top. And this one differs from other Miscanthuses because this one will have a golden plume on the top, where most of the others you see will have a tan plume on top.
This is tall enough to be a great screen.
It's a good screen, but you know, depending on what people want, lots of times if you want a screen all year round, you know, you're going to lose the screen once you cut it back.
Correct.
But if it'll grow 4 to 5 feet in a couple months, then you've got that little screen back. I have sold them to people that use around their pool to screen the pool some. Yes, ma'am.
I love this. What is this, Ken?
This is Miscanthus sinensis, and it's called zebra grass. This is a plant that grows, you know, it's variegated. It'll grow to about 6 or 7 feet tall this year. And then once it starts to put on its plume, it'll get to be about 8 foot tall.
Do you recommend this in the back of a border, in the middle of the border, on the sides of a border, or?
This is probably best in the back of a border.
Okay.
And it's probably best if you layer 2 or 3 rows in front of it, since it gets to be so tall. The variegation is what makes it pretty.
It's gorgeous.
And there's another plant, it's Miscanthus sinensis strictus, that looks just like this about, but this one is more weeping, where the strictus is more upright. And the strictus is called porcupine grass. So if you see them like for sale in places, you'll notice the difference that way, where this one weeps and the other is more upright. So what you need to do with this as a homeowner is, I typically tell people to leave the plant when the frost hits it. It'll turn brown. It's not dead, it's just the top growth is brown.
Okay.
Then in the spring, when you start to see some new growth come up at the base, cut the plant back to about 6 to 8 inches, get rid of the dead growth, fertilize the plant, and typically I tell them to fertilize with a balanced fertilizer, 15, 15, 15, 20, 20, 20, to get that root growth.
Do you use granulars or do you?
Granular.
Okay.
Yes, use a granular fertilizer, and then sprinkle it on the ground, rains will water it in, and the plant will be fine to go.
Okay. Ken, this one's acting pretty for us today. What is this?
Yes, this is Penisetum Oriental Carly Rose. It's an Oriental Penicidum, and it's one of the first Penisetums to put on its plume. This plant gets to be, you can see, about 2.5, 3 foot tall, and it has this plume on it. Usually starts about the 1st of June, and in the landscape it'll last through fall with the watering and everything that people will normally do.
That one's great. Now right behind me, I love this blue.
Yeah, this is a Panicum. This is called Panicum vergatum dewy blue. This is a plant that gets to be about 4 feet tall, and it'll have a plume on it, kind of an airy looking plume on it. About, I don't know, here in a couple weeks you'll start to see that plume.
Is there a lot of varieties of blue, or is there only a couple?
Well, I have about 3 different colors of blue on the Panicums. Most of the other grasses are going to be green, or they're going to have a little bit of variegation to it.
All right. This grass is showing off for us today also. What is this?
Yeah, this is Calamagras Carl Forster. It's a grass that gets to be about 3.5, 4 feet tall.
It stays slender?
It'll stay slender like this, and people use these in those wetland gardens like I was telling you about. It'll do good in a more moist environment, or it could take a drier environment as well.
Like as moist as a boggy or?
Well, typically what they'll do is they plant them on the perimeter
Okay.
of the wetland area, so that it gets that moisture, but not in the middle of the wetland area, yes.
And how old are these plants?
This plant here is a 2-year-old plant.
Okay.
It was transplanted in the ground 2 years ago.
And this is the height?
This is it.
Okay.
That's correct. It may get bigger, you know,
The
over
clump
time.
size, yes.
Right, but it's not going to get any taller than that.
Okay. Ken, this one's pretty.
Yeah, this is Penisetum alloprocoites, and it's a plant that gets to be about 2.5, 3 foot tall.
So this is it?
This is it.
Okay.
And then about this time, you'll start to see it's putting on its bottle brush plume, and this plume will last until, middle of September. And if you water it in your landscape, it'll last till fall. But these are real tight bottle brushes, whereas when we saw the Carly Rose down there, it was more feathery.
We were talking about deer tracks. Are most grasses?
I don't have any trouble with deers here.
That's a good plus.
It's a plus. They don't seem to like them. You know, animals don't eat on them. I don't have any problem with that.
Tell me about pests and that sort of thing.
The ornamental grasses typically have very little problem with pests or diseases. These plants, when it gets to be real humid, you might see anthracnose on the leaves some.
Okay, wait a minute. What is that?
Anthracnose. It's a fungus.
Okay.
Fungus that gets on the plants, and you can treat it with a fungicide.
Okay.
But it's really typically not a problem.
It's just cosmetic, so to speak.
That's correct. It's cosmetic. Very few pests. You put these in the ground. You're not pruning them all year long. They grow. You prune them in next spring, and then they grow again.
Okay.
This plant is Miscanthus sinensis little zebra, and it differs from the regular zebra grass because this only gets to be about 3.5 feet tall. It'll have the same plume on it that the regular zebra grass does. It's just that you have that smaller size that works better in some landscapes.
I kind of like this one better, I think, just because of the size.
Right, it's more rounded, it's not so upright, and it's, you know, like I say, it's kind of a mass of a plant instead of just a big upright plant.
As a homeowner, if this clump got too big, tell me how I go about dividing it.
Okay, now these plants, like all the ornamental grasses, you can take this plant and you could dig it up, and then you can divide it. You can cut it in half, you cut it into fours, however many plants you want to get out of it.
Would you dig the whole clump up first?
I would dig the whole clump up
Okay.
and divide it. That way you can, when you replant it, you're getting it back in the ground good. And it's like I say, you just dig it up, take your shovel, cut it up, put it in the ground, and water it good and move on.
Do ornamental grasses do well in pots also?
You can do some in pots. You have to be careful that the pot size isn't too small,
Okay.
because the root system will get to be such a mass eventually that it could bust the pot.
Do the root systems on most of these ornamental grasses go deep, or they're just wide?
Well, most of the root systems on these are real fibrous, so they're not going to get to be really deep. I mean, they'll probably be in the ground 18 inches or so. So when you dig them, you dig down about 18 inches to pull them up, but it's just the fiberness of them. They get to be real thick and heavy rooted, and so if you're in a pot, it may bust that pot out. You have to make sure, I mean, if you were going to put this in a pot, you'd have to have like a 30-gallon pot
Okay.
to put it in a pot.
So the best time of the year to divide these, you think, would be in the spring?
Spring. I would divide in the spring. As soon as you start to see the new growth, divide them up, cut them up, replant them, you know, fertilize everything, and then they're good to go. When you do divide and move, you need to water for about the first couple of months just to get them situated in the ground again. Once you get them situated like that, you don't ever have to water again if you don't want to.
All right. That's good for Tennessee.
That's good for Tennessee. It is.
Ken, I like this one. It's real pointy.
Yeah, this is a Muhlenbergia. This is Muhlenbergia Capillaris white cloud. This plant gets to be about 2.5, 3 foot tall. In the fall, about the end of September or so, it'll start putting on a plume. This one will have a white plume, different than just regular Muhlenbergia Capillaris, which has a red plume. This plume will come in, like I say, about the end of September, and it'll last through frost. So this will help give you some color in the late fall. Instead of, you know, chrysanthemums and things like that, this will give you that white color. Put that in a pot. These root systems are not as thick as some of the other ornamental grasses. So it would do well in a pot.
Well, Ken, I want to tell you thank you for sharing your wonderful ornamental grasses, and thank you for sharing with the viewers.
Well, thank you for coming.
This will be
appreciate
a
it.
great insight for them, and hopefully you'll get some phone calls.
Well, hopefully they learned a little something.
I think you're very knowledgeable. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
For inspiring garden tours, growing tips, and garden projects, visit our website at volunteergardener.org or on YouTube at the Volunteer Gardener channel, and like us on Facebook.